In this video, through an example, I'm going to demonstrate the input and output qualities of a function. So let's say, for example, right here, we have a function that I've drawn over here. So again, this is just an example, and I'm going to demonstrate the properties using this example. So pause the video for a minute and just copy this function down. It's really just this yellow line, and the coordinate here is 1, 2. The coordinate here is 2, 4, and the coordinate here is 4, 1. And there's an open circle here, which means that this point actually does not count towards the function. So take a minute to pause the video for a minute and just draw this down on your piece of paper if you're copying notes. All right. So let's say, for example, I ask you so just keep in mind that, for example, this is the x, and remember we call this the input, right? And this is the y, right? And this is just simply f of x, and we call this the output. So let's say, for example, I ask you, what is the value of f of 1? So what this means is that we have an input of 1. So in other words, here on the x-axis, look at 1 and see what the output is. So when the input is 1, the output is 2, and that is simply equal to 2. Let's try for the value of 2. So let's say when the input is 2, what is the output? So when the input is 2, we can clearly see that the output is 4. So that's equal to 4. Now, this is something a little bit tricky. Let's try, for example, f of 3. Now, if you observe here, I haven't really given you an actual point for 3. But let's approximate, let me use a different color. Let's approximate that 3 is over here. Okay, let me use, maybe say red to just show it a bit more clearly. So let's just say we use 3 over here. So when it's 3 over here, so I'm just going to draw a dotted line. And if you observe, this sort of like follows 2 over here. So when I have an input of 3, my output is actually the value of 2. So this point right here has a value of 2. In other words, the y-coordinate is a value of 2. I mean, this is obviously approximate, and I'm approximating from this graph. But if you actually had a proper scale and a proper graph, you would have to read it accordingly. So in this case, f of 3, because I read it from the graph, is equal to 2. And we're done with these 3. Now let's do one last one, which is, let's say, f of 4. So you might think that if I do f of 4, well, if I look over here, the output must be 1. But keep in mind that this is an open circle, which means it doesn't count. So in other words, for this function, this point does not exist. So f of 4, so for an input of 4, the output actually does not exist. So for f of 4, we simply say does not exist. I hope that made sense through this example of inputs and outputs, and I'll see you in the next video.